What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a jam-packed show as we have a lot to get into in the world of volleyball, such as Florida. The Gators taking down not one, but two top 5 opponents. How impressive are the Gators, and are they making us all eat crow? Also, there were other upsets, such as Louisiana taking down Rice earlier in the week. Also, we had some history, such as Duke women's volleyball earning its 1,000th victory as a program. And how about the Nebraska-Omaha turnout on Wednesday, where there was 92,003 people in attendance. Absolutely amazing, absolutely historic. I'll be talking about that. Also, there was some AVP that happened. The Chicago Open was on and poppin'. Just absolutely amazing right there as well. And I gotta recap my night at Long Beach State and my afternoon at UC Irvine. So hand me a volleyball. Set up the net, because I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon, Monday evening. Either way, you have made your way into episode 210 of Set Point. And without any further delay, let's begin. But first and foremost, Set Point would not be where it's at without IE Sports Radio providing the platform to go live on Spreaker. Please do follow IE Sports Radio on what is formerly known as Twitter, X, TikTok, and on Instagram at IE Sports Radio. We also have a Facebook page for those that still use Facebook. All you just have to do is type in the word IE, then sports, then radio, like us, and then boom, that's how you're able to follow us on Facebook. We also have a website, www.iesportsradio.com, and it's updated daily for your sports news, our blog, our Hall of Fame, our Fans of the Month, our pages dedicated to each podcast, such as this one, our IE Sports Radio community forum, and our merchandise shop, because with the fall arriving, we will have merchandise such as caps, hoodies, t-shirts, all that good stuff. It's sure to knock your socks off. As for the last 9 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content, interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel, to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports. I have to give a huge shout to our sponsor, Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, the single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, it's low in sugar, and high in protein. This is some of the best jerky you can get, and all you have to do is visit www.planetjerky.net and place your order. Follow Planet Jerky on Instagram at Planet Jerky, and that's how you're able to communicate with them and catch all of their updates. Once again, huge shout out to our sponsor, Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky, the jerky that is on a whole other planet. And with all that said and done, let us begin. As Larry B has popped into the chat room, he puts a volleyball emoji, and Davidson Crook says, "What's good?" You can follow the show on Instagram at set_point_IESR. I'm trying to step up my Instagram game, which obviously is huge just because I'm trying to build a following. You can also follow Set Point on X, formerly known as Twitter, at set_point_IE, which is basically kind of where I post my games, which is where I cover my games. So that's something you all need to know all too well about, which is really cool and all. So with all that said and done, let's begin. So we had a lot of upsets. As Davidson Crooks says, what's good? And he says, doing great on Instagram, by the way. Thanks, Davidson. I'm trying to get Instagram off the ground because I'm posting my main interviews on there just because X only allows you to post 2 minutes and 20 seconds considering, unless you're subscribed, and I'm not going to pay $11.99 for that stuff. So I do appreciate the nod on that. So thank you, Davidson. And yes, I did have a lot of interviews with coaches and players and whatnot. So I do appreciate the nod. But let's talk some NCAA women's volleyball. So there were quite a number of upsets from last week. As first and foremost, we had upsets on Tuesday, as we had number 7 Texas, yes, the same Texas that lost to Long Beach State, defeating number 5 Minnesota in Minnesota 3-1, as they won 25-14, 23-25, 25-17, and 25-23. Asia O'Neal made her debut for Texas, as she kind of made the big difference. I wouldn't say it was a ginormous difference, but all in all, it was a big win for Texas, getting their first kind of marquee win. And many will say this is an upset, but I don't think it's an upset in any sort of way. I think this is just two good teams going at one another, and Texas eventually bouncing back after a 1-1 weekend where they lost to Long Beach State but beat LMU. And even in the LMU win, they kind of didn't have their great moments. But honestly, it's still a great win nonetheless. And having Asia O'Neal back really helped Texas in terms of their defense and their offense as well. Not that Bella Bergmark didn't do a great job and Molly Phillips wasn't great as a middle blocker. I think that it frees up Molly Phillips more to be on the right side, and then Maddie Skinner can still be on the left side and whatnot, and then Jenna Wenas can still be on either left or right side. So honestly, Texas having Asia O'Neal back was big time. Also on Tuesday, we had number 8 Florida upsetting number 2 Stanford, 25-19, 29-27, and 25-23. Now, this was kind of an upset that I did not expect, just because Stanford is really good. They returned most of their team, while Florida, they kind of lost a good portion of their team, and they were kind of an anomaly. I know they beat Penn State the previous week, but honestly, I did not think that Florida was going to take down Stanford on the road, just because that is a long trip from Gainesville all the way down to Northern California. But Florida was led by the reigning AVCA Player of the Week, Kennedy Martin, who had 16 kills, and she hit .394, which was pretty darn good. Stanford did have Kendall Kipp leading the way with 15 kills, and honestly, it was quite the high-hitting matchup for both these teams. Both these teams hit over 300. Defense kind of wasn't really a factor in terms of blocking, but for Florida, they outdug Stanford 42-35, which was kind of big right there. There was only 1,859 in attendance. So I don't know if you all know this, and this is kind of what me and my guest Daniel Gilman kind of touched on. Well, he especially touched on a couple weeks ago when I had him on the show, but that's kind of low for being a big-time game. For a top 10 matchup, only 1,859. Long Beach State had more in attendance in their matchup against Texas. That's not really that good if you ask me. Stanford kind of has that problem in terms of getting people to attend their games. I don't know why. It's a top 10 matchup, for goodness sake, and you have a lot to be excited about if you're a Stanford fan. You should be at these games supporting your team. I know it's an awkwardly Tuesday placed match, but come on. That's pretty sad right there. I'm sorry, but it's not good. Florida also got contributions from Sophia Victoria and Kira Hudson, who each had 9 kills. Alexis Stuckey chipped in 4 kills to go along with her 34 assists and 12 digs, which was a team high in that department. For Stanford, Jordan Harvey also chipped in 9 kills, and Sammy Francis also had 8 kills. Ali Rubin had 7 kills. Alina Ogolivi I want to say that's how it's pronounced, Ogilvy. If it's not, I apologize. She had 11 digs. Cami Minor had 10 digs to go along with her 33 assists. But unfortunately, it was not enough for Stanford. So it's a big win for Florida, as the Gators really showed that they have more bite than bark, or in this case, roar. But I digress. There was also another upset on Tuesday, as Louisiana, of all teams, I did not think Louisiana was going to do this. Louisiana swept number 18, Rice, on the road, 25-17, 25-22, 25-19. Yeah, that is very surprising, as the highest kill leader for Rice had 7 kills, which was 2 of them, one of which was Amelia Vesca, which is good, but I kind of expected better from Rice. After that great weekend they had, which also included beating USC, I thought they would have easily beaten Louisiana, but this was kind of surprising that Rice had such a horrible day. Maybe it was because they only had 1 day of rest, but I don't know. Louisiana was kind of... There's nothing really special about Louisiana. I mean, I'm not going to say that they weren't special. Obviously, they did what they did to pull out the win, but Rice was so impressive last weekend that they just hit the wall. Maybe it was just a case of the Tuesdays, but I don't know. So also on Thursday, we had number 25 Purdue taking down number 23 Kansas, 17-25, 25-19, 16-25, 25-19, and 17-15. The fifth set was a roller coaster ride, which I think had a lot of challenges from Dave Shondell. But in the end, Purdue came out on top. The surprising thing was that Purdue only missed 4 serves while Kansas missed 13. Now, sometimes that ultimately isn't the big X factor, but when it comes to a match like that, every point is kind of precious. And looking at it, I don't think there were any close sets. There were no close sets except for set 5. So if there were any missed serves in that 5th set, you'd hate to be Purdue in that situation, or Kansas. So all in all for Purdue, it was a big win for them, especially after the dreadful weekend they had, losing to the likes of Loyola Chicago and getting swept by Creighton on their home floor, mind you. So that's a big road win right there. And for Kansas, there's no shame in losing to Purdue, but I will say this, it kind of shows you're not really the greatest ranked team out there. I mean, I'll get into that a little bit, but I think it shows that Purdue needed to prove itself a little bit more as opposed to Kansas basically being bad. Because Kansas, they were undefeated going in, but they didn't really have too many true standout wins. They did not have one big-time standout win that said, oh, Kansas is really good. I mean, Kansas is decent in the Big 12, but honestly, I will say this about Kansas. I feel that they were kind of due for this loss just because you look at who Purdue has. They have Chloe Chicoine, who is a phenomenal freshman, Raven Colvin, who is a good key returner, Eva Hudson, who, honestly, do I need to say more about her? I don't. So for Purdue, it was just a big win for them. Purdue actually also followed that up with a 5-set win, another 5-set win over number 19, or then number 19, Marquette, as Purdue wound up winning 18-25, 25-18, 16-25, 29-27, and 17-15, as Eva Hudson had 21 kills to lead Purdue while hitting a .309 hitting percentage, which is big time right there. And I will say this, Purdue really redeemed themselves from last week. And considering they had to play back-to-back 5-set matches, that's also impressive. And also that second match where they were just really tired from that 5-set win, that was also another key factor right there, because Marquette didn't play yesterday or before that day. So I give Purdue a lot of credit. They really showed me that they actually deserve to be ranked. And I kind of challenged them saying, well, not telling that to them personally, but I kind of challenged Purdue to actually show them why they deserve to be a top 25 team, because when you lose to the likes of Loyola Chicago after you were up 12-7 in that 5th set, and then you also get swept by Creighton on your home floor, you kind of had to wonder, why is Purdue in the top 25? And they were number 25 going into that week. So, yeah. Then jumping over to Saturday, we had number 23 Kansas defeating number 19 Marquette in 4 sets. So Kansas dropped the first set 21-25, but wound up winning the next 3 25-20, 25-14, and 25-19. London Davis had 14 kills, and she hit .444, which was very impressive. Kansas also had another player with 13 kills, and they had another player with 12 kills. For Marquette, this was kind of a letdown week. I don't want to say this was a bad week, but I will say this. You were kind of ranked above Kansas and Purdue, but you kind of had a bit of a letdown. Now, obviously, Purdue is better than what most people give them credit for, and obviously winning on the road in Kansas is kind of tricky. So maybe we kind of need to give Marquette a little bit of a break, but next week, or this upcoming week, Marquette is going to be really challenged this week. Marquette, to me, is going to have a much bigger challenge on their dish with 3 big-time matchups. And heck, even one of those teams that's not ranked is going to give them a run for their money. So I will say this for Marquette. Flush these losses down the toilet and just focus on your next 3 opponents, which you're going to be hosting. So that's no excuse to try to at least be somewhat more competitive. Not that they weren't competitive against Kansas or Purdue. I'm just saying that if you want to go deep in the NCAA tournament, like deep, like Elite 8 deep, Final 4 deep, you're going to have a great team. Marquette went to the Sweet 16 last year, where they ultimately fell to the number 1 seed and the eventual champion Texas, and they even took a set off Texas, mind you. But I will also say, good teams don't win the championship. Great teams and amazing teams and fantastic teams and outstanding teams win the championship. And I just don't think Marquette, for the time being, is in that echelon of great, fantastic, amazing teams. But we'll see what happens with them going forward. We also had another upset on Saturday. We had James Madison, yes, the Jimmies from the Sun Belt Conference, taking down number 22 Western Kentucky at Penn State, 25-22, 25-22, and 26-24. Sophie Davis and Miette Veldman, if I mispronounced that first name, again, I do apologize. They each had 12 kills. Veldman hit .417, while Davis hit .435. So that's kind of an impressive win for James Madison. And James Madison is kind of that under-the-radar team, just because I really think that they don't get a whole lot of respect. And the Sun Belt Conference as a whole kind of gets overshadowed just because it's not that Power 5 conference, and it doesn't really have that deep team outside of like maybe Texas State. So all in all, for James Madison, that's a huge win for their program, and honestly, I think they kind of put themselves on the map. And if you remember, James Madison was in its first year in the Sun Belt Conference last year, and they wound up winning the whole thing in terms of the conference tournament. Unfortunately, they lost to BYU, which had advanced past the first round the past, I think, 6 years going into that NCAA tournament from last season. So, all in all, for James Madison, I really think they are under the radar. And when I attended the when I attended the Indiana-Washington match at Long Beach State, I talked to some of the Indiana coaches, and they said the Sun Belt Conference is underrated, and the teams like James Madison and Texas State is very underappreciated, and they deserve some more love. And that's actually a perfect segue to go into the next upset that happened on Saturday, which was Texas State taking down number 13 Houston in straight sets. This I did not expect. I was very surprised that Texas State beat Houston. Now, you got to remember, Houston did have a phenomenal weekend. Well, I wouldn't say it was greatly phenomenal. They beat USC, but then that was kind of where the buck stopped. But they skyrocketed from number 22 all the way up to number 13, which they even had a nice little soundbite of their coach saying, we're top 15 in the nation. Woo! That's me paraphrasing. But Texas State just came in. Well, they Texas State welcomed Houston, and they wound up breaking out the brooms and sweeping them. Now, looking at the stats, Houston hit only 171 compared to Texas State's 392. KJ Johnson led Texas State with 12 kills. Samantha Wunsch had 11 kills, both of which hit over 350. And heck, even Wunsch had a hitting percentage of 400, which was pretty darn good if you ask me. Even though Texas State missed 14 serves, they still overcame that, as Houston didn't even have one ace. They missed 8 serves. Texas State also outdug Houston 49-41. And in terms of blocks... I'm sorry, I'm looking at the block thing. In terms of blocks, the blocks were in... Texas State had 7 service aces and missed 8 serves, while Houston had 5 service aces and 4 service errors. So the blocks is where I'm seeing the whole 2 and 14 and then 0 and 8. As Houston as a team had only 4 blocks, while Texas State as a team had 9 blocks, which is pretty darn good if you ask me. And then the third set, Texas State hit 571, and they only had 1 error. They only had 5 hitting errors on the night, which just goes to show that they were really on their A game. Houston had 19 hitting errors, which big yikes right there. And that first set was what really was the tip of the iceberg, as Houston had 10 kills on 9 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of 26, which that's not going to win you a whole lot of games, especially in the very competitive Big 12. Houston was led by Kenna Sauer, who had 13 kills. Abby Jackson had 9 kills, but that's kind of where the buck stopped, as Rachel Tulos had the highest hitting percentage with 5 kills on 8 swings, no hitting errors, with a hitting percentage of 625. Everyone else didn't really have that great of a night for Houston, unfortunately. And Kate Georgiadis had 11 digs, which was kind of a bright spot right there, but it wasn't really the greatest bright spot for Houston. So, all in all for Texas State, this was a huge win for them, and for Houston, now you're back to the drawing board, unfortunately. So, it is what it is for the Cougars, but for the Bobcats, sick 'em is all I gotta say. And then on Sunday, we had Florida sweeping number 5 Minnesota in Gainesville, 25-22, 25-18, and 25-22. So this was a big win for Florida. It was their second straight top 5 win, as Florida was led by Kennedy Martin, who had 15 kills. I really think they found their big-time hitter after the likes of Merritt Beeson transferred, Bertie Hendrickson transferred, and whatnot. And then they lost a few others to graduation as well. Anna Dixon also had 8 kills. She was big time right there. Remember, she transferred from Missouri, and she is now shining as another pin hitter. Sophia Victoria and AC Fitzpatrick each had 7 kills, as Minnesota was led by McKenna Worker. Again, I've heard that that's how the pronunciation is called. She had 9 kills. Taylor Landfair had 8 kills. But that's kind of where the buck stopped, as Minnesota only had a hitting percentage of 147. Florida only had a hitting percentage of 248. But here's the big thing that kind of sticks out to me. Florida, despite playing in a 3-set match, they had 61 digs. 61 compared to Minnesota's 45. As Ellie McKissock had 15 of them. Trinity Adams had 12 of them, and then Alexa Stuckey had 11 of them as the setter. So that was a big-time win for Florida, and I guess that's pretty much it for the upsets. And I might as well just get into this now. Florida is my NCAA team of the week. They're the Set Point NCAA Division I Women's Volleyball Team of the Week. When you're pulling off 2 top 5 upsets, one of which was on the road, and via a sweep, mind you, you're doing something correct. And honestly, I'm just going to say this. I didn't think Florida was actually going to be big time, but the Gators are really proving themselves. And I think they are now proving themselves as a threat to the SEC. They were already a big-time threat, but I will say this. Florida, to me, is starting to become really scary, and everyone thought they were going to take a step back with the likes of their players transferring, their players graduating, but they have other players stepping up, and I really got to give credit to Mary Wise. She is the wise one, if you ask me. So, good job to Florida on their 2 sweeps, and they still have remained undefeated. And these are all quality opponents. Yes, they did have to go 5 with USF, but beating Penn State is no laughing matter, especially with the talent that they have. Beating Stanford on the road with the talent that they have, certainly no laughing matter. And sweeping Minnesota with the resume, the head coach, and the players that they have, that certainly is no laughing matter. So, good job to Florida for their accolades and accomplishments, as they are my set point NCAA Women's Volleyball Team of the Week for week number 2. So other notable results that we happen to have in week number 2 of the NCAA Women's Volleyball season. So on Thursday, we had Duke defeating Loyola Maryland 25-15, 26-28, 25-13, and 25-23. So you're probably wondering, well, why is this a thing, Teran? Why are you bringing up Duke Women's Volleyball? That win is huge because that's actually their 1,000th win as a program. So big shout out to Duke Women's Volleyball on their accomplishment. In the win over Loyola Maryland, Carrie Keefe had 24 kills, and she hit a whopping .538, which is huge right there. And she's only a sophomore. She was big time as a freshman, and she was also big time at Marymount High School, which is kind of the Loyola Marymount of high schools, but I digress. But Carrie Keefe had 24 kills, she hit .538, and she had 8 digs. So that is kind of a big game right there for Duke. Then we also had Wisconsin outlasting Arkansas in 5 on Wednesday, and they also outlasted Tennessee in 5 on Sunday. And I want to say they also went 4 with Arkansas on the day after on Thursday. But I will just also say this, Arkansas is pretty darn good. I think Arkansas is proving why they deserve to be ranked as well as Tennessee. So I'll just say this about Wisconsin. I don't think they're bad at all. They just got to be a little bit more careful just because, for starters, I think they are a phenomenal team. But I will also say this. They just have to they're kind of dancing on being defeated and upset, and they're dancing with pulling out a dramatic victory. I'm not saying that they're bad, but I will just say this. They really have to mind their P's and Q's, and they have to basically, be a little bit more cautious. But again, this is why Arkansas is ranked. This is why Tennessee is ranked. And this is why you schedule those teams. You don't just schedule cookie-cutter opponents. Because if you schedule cookie-cutter opponents, you're not getting any better. Especially when you're playing in the Big Ten and you've got big-time opponents that are going to be heading down for you and trying to attempt to upset you on a normal basis as well. And then you also have to remember that Wisconsin also defeated Baylor and TCU, and it was actually a sweep. Arkansas got swept by Wisconsin the day after they went 5 with Wisconsin. And by the way, those 2 matchups were actually on the road. So Wisconsin had to travel down to Fayetteville, Arkansas, and then Wisconsin also hosted Tennessee. Now, Tennessee, I'll give them credit. They battled back from an 0-2 deficit to force a 5th set. Unfortunately for the Lady Vols, they fell just short, which if they had pulled off the upset, man, they would have been proven as a top 25 team. I still think Tennessee is a top 25 team just because for Tennessee, they actually had to go from San Diego all the way down to Madison, Wisconsin. Tennessee actually played in the San Diego tournament where they played San Diego and Boston College and beat both of those said teams prior to that matchup against Wisconsin. So for Tennessee, I think they still deserve to be top 25. But this week, they are going to be tested as they're heading down to Marquette to play the likes of Pitt, Loyola Chicago, and obviously Marquette. And then for Arkansas, they're just going to keep getting better as the season progresses. They did beat Michigan, which I don't want to say this to be mean to Michigan fans, and I don't want to say this in disrespect of Aaron Virtue, but Mark Rosen kind of was correct when he said he doesn't like where the Michigan program is heading. And this is and you got to remember, 200th episode, I had Mark Rosen on as a guest. He unfortunately did say that, and I kind of agree, because Michigan is kind of going down the toilet. They're losing to the likes of Western Michigan, which is like, ugh. I know Michigan lost a lot of players to graduation. I understand that Michigan has a lot of turmoil. They have a first-year head coach, but that first-year head coach is kind of experienced. So I don't know why Michigan is struggling. And here's the thing. If Michigan is struggling early on now, they're for sure going to be struggling in Big Ten play because, well, you just can't lose to the likes of Western Michigan. It just doesn't work that way. And we can give Aaron Virtue a pass for the first season, but it's going to be up to her to basically continue to turn the program around. I mean, Mark Rosen built that program from the ground up. He coached there for like 28 years, and he has over 600 wins, and he is the all-time winningest coach at Michigan. So it's a hard act to follow to basically try to top that. So here's hoping that Michigan does turn it around. I want them to turn it around and be successful, but you also got to remember they lost Jess Robinson, Jess Mruzek, and May Pertovsky to the transfer portal. Those are three big-time players who are now contributing to their new teams. Pertovsky contributing to Washington, Robinson contributing to Duke, and then Mruzek contributing to Penn State, which Penn State managed to have a successful weekend on its home floor, defeating the likes of Western Kentucky and James Madison. So one last bit of volleyball news, and then we'll close the book on NCAA Women's Volleyball Week number 2. So for those that kind of lived under a rock on Wednesday, Nebraska did play Omaha, but it wasn't played at the Devaney Center. It was played somewhere else. It was played at Memorial Stadium, which is where their football team plays at. So you're never going to believe how many was drawn to this event, how many fans and spectators were drawn to this event. So first and foremost, Nebraska swept Omaha 25-14, 25-14, 25-13. It was kind of expected that Nebraska was going to win because at the time they were number 4 in the nation. So nothing against Omaha, but this was kind of the expected result. But here's the thing. In this facility, in this event, there was, can we get a drum roll please? There was 92,003 people in attendance as fans. Let me say that again. There were 92,003 people There were 92,003 fans in attendance. So that was big time right there. And in addition, there were 518,000 viewers when it came to watching this event. Now, sadly, I could not watch this event. And yes, y'all are going to blast my DMs and say, oh my God, Teran, you didn't watch this. Well, I have something called work, and I have to basically make that paycheck and do my coverage of everything else just because I do basically care about my other contributions. And David Sickrick says he had a lot of friends that went to that game. So that's awesome. That's really great. And now they're part of history. So, and sadly, I don't have the Big Ten Network. If I didn't have to work that Wednesday, I would have totally bought the Big Ten Network for that match. And honestly, I would have totally just watched it. But I will go back and watch it in the archives of ESPN if they have it there. Which, if they do, awesome. If they don't, so be it. But for that matchup, that was just absolutely amazing right there, just to have that turnout. 92,003 fans. We're talking about fans here, not just authorized media personnel and whatnot. I know Emily Eamon and the entire Big Ten crew was there. Gotta give a shout out to her and her coverage. I would have really liked to have attended this event. And heck, even the Twitter world was buzzing. Heck, even my friends who aren't even volleyball fans were talking about this. They were saying amazing turnout for Nebraska, and they were just in awe that 92,003 people, or 3 fans, were in attendance. So that's just absolutely amazing. So great job to everyone that was involved. And a huge shout to Nebraska, the University of Nebraska, and Omaha. So great job to them. And yes, Mikey Two Guns, that was an amazing turnout. And the 518,000 viewers, let me tell you this. Well, first and foremost, the 92,003 fans in attendance were actually the most in attendance of any sporting event and any female sporting event. So that's big time right there. And the 518,000 viewers, let me just tell you that. There's a lot of history when it comes to that. So the 518,000 viewers on Volleyball Day in Nebraska was the most watched non-conference volleyball event in Big Ten Network history. Yeah. And this isn't just on... Yeah, this is non-conference. This isn't We're not talking about conference play. We're talking about non-conference play. Now this makes me really want to get the Big Ten Network, just because I don't want to miss out on anything. But at the same time, is it worth me paying all that money? On the off chance where once volleyball season's done, I'm not going to be able to have it anymore. So, yeah. So back to the whole 92,003 fans in attendance. It's the world record for a women's sporting event. So, I don't know if it's the record for a sporting event entirely, but 92,003 fans in attendance for a women's volleyball game. That's how you grow the game of volleyball. And again, world record for a women's volleyball sporting event. Absolutely amazing. Hats off to the University of Nebraska. But back to the whole Big Ten thing. So in addition to that, the broadcast in Volleyball Day in Nebraska was actually number 2 all-time in regular season in NCAA volleyball audiences across all networks. So this was the second most viewed event in NCAA volleyball history in terms of being watched across all networks. So, wow. Just absolutely amazing job by the University of Nebraska, getting everything to have the great turnout that it was. The Big Ten Network did their thing. It was just phenomenal. So, great job to both teams. Yes, Omaha had a hand in it as well. Just because volleyball is big time in not just Nebraska but Omaha as well. So great job to Omaha and Nebraska, and hats off to them on that one. So I will just also say this. I actually have to give a shout out to someone that reached out to me first and foremost, there was no doubt that this record was going to be broken. As some people were saying, we may be seeing the record for most people at a women's volleyball or for a women's sporting event. I basically said we will be setting the record. So there was actually so unfortunately, I, being the sad man that I am, sadly I did not go to this matchup, but someone reached out to me. She said, I'm at the stadium. If you need anyone to interview about the experience or anything of that sort for your show, I'd be happy to. Now, sadly, I did not get back to this person, and I feel horrible, but I do want to give a shout out to @Lynn's Willie on Twitter. Her @ is @LYNDS, then Willie, WILLI. It's all one word. I have to give her a huge shout out to her reaching out to me and offering me that. While that was amazing and all, I just didn't want to put more work into her just because work on her dish. Now, if anyone would like to contribute to Set Point and help me out, in case I'm not like at that sporting event, or I'm not at a sporting event like that or anywhere else, you are more than welcome to. And all you just gotta do is reach out to me on Twitter X at set_point.ie, or on Instagram at set_point.iesr. So, yeah, I do got to give her a shout out, and it must have been such an amazing experience for Lindsay to be there. So, huge shout out to at LindsWilly for being there and being part of history, and for basically doing all that she can. And thank you for reaching out. I just want to give you that huge shout out, just because that does mean a lot that you basically would reach out, and it's never really happened to me. No one has ever offered to help me in that regard. I was just unfortunately too busy the following days. Thursday I had more work in terms of like sports coverage. Friday I had to do color commentary for a high school football game, and I also had to do another podcast. Saturday I had to cover Washington, Indiana, and then Long Beach State, UCLA. Sunday, I covered Boston College, UC Irvine. So, unfortunately, I did not. And then today, I had work at my other retail job, which hopefully that will not be a thing once Set Point gets to become big time. But I do, once again, have to give the shout out to at LindsWilly on Twitter. I really do appreciate you offering me that to you. And I gotta do something to like pay it forward. We'll see though. So before we officially close the book on week number 2, I have to talk about my night at Long Beach State on Saturday, and then my afternoon on Sunday at UC Irvine. So for Long Beach State, I got to attend 2 matches: Indiana and Washington as a member of the media, and then UCLA and Long Beach State. So Indiana, Washington, it was kind of a good matchup. Washington actually wound up sweeping Indiana, which actually was the first sweep, or the first match, the first sweep of the entire tournament. Yes, it was titled the Long Beach State Tournament. They had the LBSU tournament the previous week, and then the Long Beach State Tournament this week. Great naming of tournament titles, Long Beach. Come on, you could have thought of something better than that. You could have named it the Brian Gimolaro Tournament. Come on now. Or the Misty May Tournament. Anyway, so the Indiana-Washington match was great. Washington swept Indiana, but Indiana made him work for that matchup, as Audra Wilmus had 12 kills, 9 digs. I got to interview Leslie Gabriel, their head coach, and believe it or not, I was actually the first person to interview Leslie Gabriel, as no one else had interviewed her prior as a head coach. So I'm glad I made history when it came to interviewing her, and unless someone else can prove me wrong otherwise, I'm happy to have met her, and I'm happy to have gotten the interview with her. And I also got to interview May Pertovsky, the transfer from Michigan. And a fun fact, I actually got to I got to see a little bit of her play at Sierra Canyon. And I also got to interview Audra Wilmus, who, I will just say this, she's pretty awesome. She's only a sophomore, and she nearly had a double-double. So I was thinking she was going to get that double-double, but she was just one dig away. But she did everything else correctly. And I will say for Molly Wilson, only a sophomore, she's going to do big things for that program. She has to take over for LMA Powell. That is not an easy feat, because LMA Powell is a big Hall of Fame person at Washington. Hall of Fame player. But for her to take over, for Molly Wilson to take over for LMA Powell following the graduation of LMA Powell, that's big time right there. John B. in the chat room on Spreaker, he says, "Hey, I saw you at one of the matches, and I want to say thank you for the great coverage, but unfortunately, he checked out. Nice to see volleyball getting some airtime." Thank you, John. I appreciate you telling me that, and I try to cover as many volleyball matches as I can. I'm kind of limited in terms of trying to cover as much as I can, but I try to do my best in terms of getting around more often than not. So as for the UCLA Long Beach State match, that one was a bit of a barn burner. I was hoping we'd get a barn burner because the last two times Long Beach State and UCLA met, UCLA swept them. But that was back in the Joy Mackenzie Furbringer era. This time around, UCLA and Long Beach State rekindled the rivalry. Now, UCLA did not have their head coach, Alfie Reft, who was a part of the U.S. women's national coaching team staff, which is a big-time thing right there. So, great job to him. So, their head coach was Jen Malcolm, who was the associate head coach. So, she did a phenomenal job as taking over as head coach. So, great stuff right there. UCLA jumped out to a 2-0 lead. The first set, they actually jumped out to like a, I think it was 6 or 7 point lead. Long Beach State trimmed the lead down to 1, but it was just not enough. When you're facing the likes of like Anna Dodson and Desiree Becker, just to name a couple, and heck, even Carly Hendrickson, you're going to have to be on your A game if you want to beat UCLA. But if not, you're going to be falling flat on your face. Now, I'll give credit to Long Beach State. They took the third set, and it was a rather close third set. They actually had to win it off of a dig kill from Zaina Meyer, who was in the right place at the right time. And unfortunately, Sheridan Leverett just could not get to the ball. She couldn't corral it perfectly, which forced a fourth set. But in that fourth set, UCLA kind of took off the kid gloves and basically just said, playtime's over, Long Beach. They wound up winning the fourth set 25-21, and they wound up winning the match. It was UCLA's 11th straight win over Long Beach State in women's volleyball. That's including postseason as well, so oof. But UCLA is just that good. Again, you have two of the best middle blocker duos in Anna Dodson and Desiree Becker. You also have Sheridan Leverett, who is doing phenomenal work. Iman Njai has really taken the outside hitter position ever since Charity Looper transferred to Louisville. Carly Hendrickson had a phenomenal game, which Ashley Mullen was running the offense really effectively, and she's only a freshman. Keep in mind, Ashley Mullen is only a freshman, and she's setting for UCLA. That's huge right there. Do you know how... I don't even remember the last time a freshman set for UCLA. So, all the chips are on the table for the Bruins. And then Peyton... I'm hopefully not going to butcher her last name. Peyton Dueck. That's her last name. She's also playing beach volleyball. Peyton Dueck was also phenomenal at libero for the Bruins. And overall, I think this is a team... I'm going to make this prediction right now. I think UCLA makes the NCAA tournament. Last year, they just narrowly missed out on the NCAA tournament. They were the first 3 teams out of the NCAA tournament, which really sucks because that actually was Mike Seeley's last year. And Mike Seeley's on to doing better things with like the U.S. national team. So now it's a new era with Alfie Reft and Jen Malcolm as the head coach and associate head coach. And it's a whole new staff. So for UCLA, I think there are going to be brighter days ahead. And I think this year is going to be a great year for them because they have a lot of wealthy talent on their team. And their future kind of looks bright as well. But they obviously want to focus on this year just because I think this is a win-now team. Same could be said for Long Beach State. But UCLA is kind of going to need a win now because you got Anna Dodson, who is a phenomenal middle blocker. Desiree Becker just complements her really well, and the list goes on and on. And then jumping over to UC Irvine and Boston College on Sunday. So I attended that matchup, and starting out, UC Irvine was really good. You have to remember that UC Irvine just came back from Chicago, and I was thinking, well, they might be jet-lagged, so Boston College might catch them on a tired day. I talked to their head coach, Ashley Hayne, before the match. All she just said was, as long as everyone just returns safe and sound, it's all good. That's kind of the whole MO for Ashley Hayne. But UC Irvine took the first set 25-22. They almost took the second set. They were down 23-19. They wound up reeling off 5 points in a row, but they just could not score that score on set point, as Boston College took that second set 29-27. They wound up taking the third set 25-12, and they wound up taking the fourth set 25-15, en route to winning the match. I kind of expected Boston College to win the match, but I will say this for UC Irvine, they are resilient. For them, that first set really showed that they can kind of hang with anybody, and this is kind of the whole any given day, any given week that anybody can beat anybody. And for UC Irvine, obviously last week was such a horrible week in terms of losing to the likes of New Mexico, Seton Hall, and San Francisco. And then this week they kind of topped it all off with beating Illinois State and Jacksonville State. And then on like less than 24 hours rest and not too much of preparation, they had to try to take down Boston College, but it was to no avail. Also have to remember that Boston College did play Tennessee and San Diego, but they were already in California. They didn't have to travel from Chicago to California, and that's just so tough for Irvine to try to basically turn around and get that win over a Power 5 school. It doesn't get any easier for UC Irvine because they've got BYU, Washington State, and Towson this week in no particular order. And they're at Washington State. So they only have 1 day of rest, and then, which is today. Tomorrow they have to fly out to Pullman, which is Washington State, for the Cougar Classic. Yes, at first I thought the Cougar Classic was going to be in BYU because BYU and Washington State are both named the Cougars. Ooh! Anyway, and then they've got Towson, which Towson made the NCAA tournament, and they aren't really the Towson that was last year's Towson. But I will say this, UC Irvine is beefing up their schedule so that they can be ready for the Big West, because they were chosen to finish 6th, and that's kind of where I expected them to be, just because I don't think they're going to overcome the likes of Hawaii. I don't know about Santa Barbara. That's kind of an anomaly right there, but they look pretty good when they taking down the likes of San Diego State and Pepperdine, especially Pepperdine in a reverse sweep. Good gracious. They also, and I guess Santa Barbara also played Oregon, which Oregon swept them. Long Beach State has been playing really good opponents. They play Nebraska this weekend at Nebraska. Cal Poly has kind of been an anomaly, but they're not to be underestimated with Tommy Stockham. And then Davis, they're also playing tough opponents as well. They played BYU last weekend, got swept. But for Davis, I think they'll learn from that and eventually get it together. And only the top 6 teams advance to the Big West Conference tournament. So for UC Irvine, they really got to keep it together. So we'll see what happens going forward. All right, but that is going to do it for week 2. I know that was a little bit more long-winded than normal, but let's get on into the AVCA Women's Volleyball / TeraFlex coaches poll for Division 1. So 25 through 21 consists of Auburn at 25, Marquette at 24, Hawaii at 23, Kansas at 22, and Houston at 21. 20 through 16 consists of Purdue at 20, Kentucky at 19, Tennessee at 18, Arkansas at 17, and Creighton at 16. 15 through 11 consists of Ohio State at 15, Baylor at 14, Washington State at 13, Penn State at 12, and Georgia Tech at 11. 10 through 6 consists of Minnesota at 10, Pitt at 9, BYU at 8, Texas at 7, and Oregon at 6. 5 through 1 consists of Stanford at 5, Nebraska at 4, Florida at 3, Louisville at 2, and your still number 1 team in the AVCA / TeraFlex Division 1 Women's Volleyball Coaches Poll is Wisconsin. So Auburn and Hawaii entered the top 25, which is really good. Finally, Hawaii has entered the top 25. Their only losses to Oregon. They beat San Diego, which was number 13 at the time. They beat USC twice this past weekend, which USC was receiving votes. That was kind of the kicker to get them into that top 25. Auburn is sneakily entering the top 25. That SEC is looking rather impressive. You got Florida in the top 3. You got Kentucky up there. Arkansas and Tennessee are also up there as well. Man, Tennessee over Kentucky. Ooh. Man, Cats Talk Wild is not going to like that. Yeah, that SEC is just looking really good. And as well as the Big 12. You've got Kansas up there, Houston's up there, BYU is up there, Baylor is up there, Texas is up there. That's 5 teams from the Big 10, or the Big 12 and the 5 teams from the Big 12 and the SEC that are in the top 25. And then, like I said, Hawaii finally deserves some love after they were just short of not making it into the top 25. This weekend, Hawaii hosts Liberty, Pepperdine, and UCLA, which I think that's going to be a great matchup for that UCLA one. But that's going to do it for the AVCA / TeraFlex Women's Volleyball Coaches Poll in Division 1. We'll take ourselves a short break. When we come back, I will bring you the AVP's Chicago Open recap, and I will also talk a little bit of high school volleyball, and then I'll preview Week 3 of the NCAA Women's Volleyball season. Keep it locked here. You were listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
Hello, sports fans. It's me, your boy Larry B, and I want to walk you through the world of sports. No. Not just the mainstream major TV deal type sports, although those are important too. But let me be your guide through your journey of all sports, from college to the pros, the minors, and everything in between. Each week, we are talking sports galore with true diehards just like you from a hardcore fan's perspective that's sure to quench your thirst around leagues you may know all too well and some you may even discover here. That's right, sports fans. If you love sports of all kinds, enjoy hearing amazing sports stories, and respect all sports because you know how difficult any of them can be to play or compete in, then this is your show. Join me, your boy Larry B, on The Defining Moment each week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports, and let the sports come to you.
Hello, ladies and sinners. Hello, sports fans around the world. Hello, IE Sports family. This is Cale Henderson, the host of IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio. If you folks are interested in sports in the Vegas area, if you're wanting to have a blast for 1 hour, every Tuesday night from 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, this is a show built for the Vegas sports fans, where we feature the Las Vegas Raiders, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Aces, and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada Rebels. Hopefully, fingers crossed, MLB team coming soon. Either way, if you folks are looking to have a blast for 1 hour each and every week, tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you folks are interested in Vegas sports news, go to our Twitter, at SinCities_IESR, and you can speak with me, the host, Cale Henderson, at Cale_Henderson on Twitter. At any time, be happy to reply. Always want to reach out to our fans. Again, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. the Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Definitely do check out all of our amazing shows, especially that last one, Chi-Town Weekly with Adam Karnick. Adam goes live 1 hour before Set Point goes live, which is the norm whenever I don't have to move my show. But regardless, welcome back to the second half of Set Point. Without any further delay, let's get on into it, as there was some other volleyball that happened over the weekend. Not just NCAA women's volleyball, but there was some AVP that happened, as we had ourselves, or I'm sorry, not some NCAA that we had. We had the AVP that happened, as the Chicago Open was basically in effect, as it was actually the last tournament that we had before the AVP Championships, which has yet to be announced, and there's no location to be said where it's going to be at. Anyway, so for the men's side, we'll jump to the men's side first, then we'll go to the women's side. So I don't want to go through all of the tournament just because I took so long on the NCAA women's volleyball side. I'm sorry to all the AVP fans, but the Final Four on the men's side consisted of Andy Benish and Miles Partain taking on Avery Drost, friend of the show and former guest, and Phil Dalhouser. And then on the other semifinal, we had Chase Buninger and Miles Evans taking on Theo Brunner and Trevor Crabb. Long story short, Brunner and Crabb were the 2 seed, while Benish and Partain were the 1 seed. And long story short, they swept their respective semifinals. And I felt heartbroken that our good friend of the show / former guest Avery Drost fell in the semifinals. It would have been awesome to see Avery Drost in the final, but it is what it is. So in the final, we had Benish and Partain taking on Brunner and Crabb. And believe it or not, we actually had Theo Brunner and Trevor Crabb sweeping Andy Benish and Miles Partain 21-18, 21-19 to win the Chicago Open, which is a huge win for them just because, well, that gets them ready for the AVP Championships, which, if they didn't have enough points to get in, well, now they do. I'm sure they do, though, because they were the number 2 seed of this tournament, and your point rating has to be pretty high if you're basically going to be contending in the AVP Championship, or your seed has to be high. Because I think only the top six pairs in terms of the AVP rankings can advance, and then everyone else is basically does not get to show up. So for Brunner and Crabb, it was a big win for them, as they didn't even have to advance through the contenders bracket. And it looks like they didn't even lose an entire set. So Brunner and Crabb didn't even lose one set the entire tournament, which is quite phenomenal. And something was going to have to give, because Benish and Partain only lost one set throughout the entire tournament going into that match, which was to Sean Cook and Cody Caldwell. Unfortunately for Benish and Partain, they just fell short of winning the tournament, which is understandable. But hey, you faced a red hot team, a red hot pair, which was no easy feat. Like, Brunner and Crabb were just kicking butt and taking names. Now, the women's side was, I wouldn't say it was ultimately eventful. You had the top 4 seeds advancing. It's just that every seed kind of had a different journey, as Julia Scholes and Betsy Flint and Melissa Humana Paredes and Brandy Wilkerson were the first semifinal, which was the 4 and 3 seed. And then the other semifinal was Taryn Cloth and Kristen Nuss taking on Sarah Hughes and Kelly Chang in the other semifinal. And let's just say that the semifinals and final were so amazing, as unlike the men's final, which sadly featured sweeps, the women's semifinals and final featured matches that went 3. So Jimena Paredes and Wilkerson managed to outlast Betsy Flint and Julia Scholes in 3 sets, 21-13, 17-21, and 15-9, which was big time right there for the Canadian duo. And then Taryn Kloth and Kristen Nuss, which actually wound up winning the Chicago Open last year, they managed to outlast Kelly Cheng and Sarah Hughes 17-21, 22-20, and 15-12 to advance to the final. So Taryn Kloth and Kristen Nuss had a little bit of a scare in that second set, but they wound up advancing to the final. And then the final, Kloth and Nuss managed to defend their Chicago Open tournament crown from last season, as Kloth and Nuss won against Melissa Jimena Paredes and Brandy Wilkerson 21-14, 15-21, and 15-21, and then 15-8 in set 3. So it was a big win, and unlike last year, Kloth and Nuss didn't need to win this tournament to advance to the AVP Championships. Last year, Kloth and Nuss really needed to win the Chicago Open to advance to the AVP Championships, or guarantee them a spot in the AVP Championships, which they did. And eventually, Kloth and Nuss managed to win the entire AVP Championships in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, I don't think that's like the Super Bowl of the... I want to say that's like the equivalent of the Super Bowl of the AVP. I'd have to get confirmation of that, but it's like the big shebang. It's basically only the top 6 pairs can go to. So for Kloth and Nuss, it was a big tournament win for them. They actually wound up losing in the winners bracket quarterfinals to Betsy Flint and Julia Scholes, but they managed to win their way through the contenders bracket, and that's how they were able to win the tournament. The same can be said for Melissa Jimena Paredes and Brandy Wilkerson. They actually lost in the winners bracket quarterfinals, and they had to win their way through the contenders bracket as well. So for those two pairs winning their way through the contenders bracket and making it all the way to the final, it's big time right there. Because as Melissa Jimena Paredes said when I interviewed her back at the Huntington Beach Open, there are a lot of good pairs. It's not just those two. Sarah Hughes and Kelly Cheng, they are straight up phenomenal. You also have Betsy Flint and Julia Scholes, which wound up winning the Manhattan Beach Open last tournament. They're also good. You also can't count out Megan Kraft and Emily Stockman, though unfortunately Megan Kraft was not Stockman's partner, as Stockman's partner was Megan Rice. Yeah, Megan J. Rice, the same Megan Rice that played at LMU and played at Redondo Union High School, which wound up making the Hermosa Beach final. As Adam Karnick pops in the chat room, he says, "Good evening, Teran. Sorry I'm late. Had to get the kids to bed." No problem, Adam. I'm actually recapping the Chicago Open as we speak. As, once again, definitely check out Adam Karnick and Chi-Town Weekly every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. Back to the AVP's Chicago Open. There are a lot of good pairs in the AVP, and the fact that only 6 of them get to advance to the championships, wherever it's going to be located, is going to be straight up amazing. And this championships is probably going to be up for grabs on the women's side. Maybe on the men's side as well, but it all depends on which pair shows up. I'm not even going to make predictions for the men's and women's side, because I know my predictions is going to basically straight up belly flop. And and I don't know where you got the whole Gold Cup thing. Maybe that's... And Adam says, "Sweet, I saw that the Gold Cup was on this weekend and instantly thought of you." Thanks, Adam. I don't know where you thought where the Gold Cup is, but it's called the Gold Series Chicago Open. So I actually have been pronouncing the incorrect vernacular. It's not called the Chicago Open. It's called the Gold Series Chicago Open. So it's the Gold Series, not the Gold Cup. But close enough. Anyway, but thank you for thinking of me, Adam. That really meant a lot. And when I saw that the tournament was in Chicago, I kind of thought of you. I'm like, doesn't Adam like beach volleyball? And doesn't he like Chicago? Anyway, but thank you for popping into the chat room, Adam Karnick. So the next AVP tournament will not be until the AVP Championships, which sadly does not have any details. It won't have the entry list. It doesn't have a location, and it doesn't have any information whatsoever. So I don't even know where it's going to be at. So we don't even know when it's going to be at. So figure it out, AVP. I need to, and I hope it's not on the weekend I have my 4-year anniversary of Set Point, because I just realized this on the day that Nebraska volleyball day in Nebraska happened, that August 30th is actually 1 month away from Set Point turning 4 years old, which was when I first said the words, "What's up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez." And I sounded so horrible. I can't wait to play back that horrible, horrible quality-sounding clip for everyone to hear. But I digress. So yeah, the AVP's next tournament is going to be the Championships. And I like how it's called the Championships. It's not called the AVP... It's not called the AVP Championships. It's called the Championships. Doesn't have a location, which makes me sad face, but oh well. The tournament after the Championships will be the final tournament, which will be Laguna Beach Open. So the Laguna Beach Open is the final tournament of the AVP season. So I'm hoping to be at that one just because it's volleyball, beach volleyball in my backyard. And I'm hoping I will actually get to register as a member of the media just because I really want to. And I'd rather have quality videos in the stadium, not be like on the outside looking in. And I really want like one-on-one or like pair on me interviews. So anyway, but that's going to do it for the AVP portion of this show. We're only down to just 2 tournaments in the AVP season. Where did the season go, man? It's like the season just flew by so quickly. All right, but that's going to do it for AVP. Let's talk a little high school volleyball. So last week I discussed that Mater Dei Mira Costa was going to be a phenomenal matchup, which featured the number 1 team being Mater Dei and the number 2 team being Mira Costa. And like I said, if I didn't have work the following day in the morning, I would have totally gone to Mira Costa Mater Dei. It was in Manhattan Beach, so that was kind of also another X factor right there. But I didn't really miss much, as Mira Costa straight up swept Mater Dei. Now, Mater Dei only had 2 days to rest and prepare for Mira Costa because they were coming back from the Volleypalooza tournament in Texas, which that's such a tough turnaround. It's kind of like how UC Irvine had a tough turnaround coming from Chicago in playing Illinois State and Jacksonville State, and then playing Boston College the following day. So for Mater Dei, unfortunately, they suffered their first loss of the season. The first set, they wound up, Mira Costa took it 25-21. Mater Dei was actually leading 13-9, but then Mira Costa, and then I think they eventually led 17-13, but Mira Costa eventually caught up to them, and they took that first set from there. And then second set, Mira Costa wound up leading a good portion of the way, but Mater Dei got it all the way down to like 2 at 21-19. But Mira Costa took that second set 25-21. And then the third set, Mater Dei led 16-9. And everyone's probably thinking, okay, this one is going to at least go 4. Nope. Ever since trailing 16-9, Mira Costa outscored the Monarchs 16-3. That is a big-time turnaround right there. Mater Dei only scored 3 points after they led 16-9, which is just mind-blowing if you ask me. And Mater Dei is a very good team. They're not the cookie-cutter opponent that Mira Costa is destined to sweep. This was basically a pick-up matchup right here. So for Mira Costa to sweep that matchup, I know it was at Mira Costa High School, but I will just say Mira Costa really showed why they can contend. And it also helps that they do have Charlie Furbringer back on the team, who is a Wisconsin commit, and I think she's going to do wonders for the Badgers. For Mater Dei, they also have some firepower in terms of their commits. They have one girl going to Michigan, one girl going to San Diego, another player going to Brown. one of their juniors going to UC Santa Barbara. They have a lot. They've got some good firepower in terms of players committing to Division I colleges for women's volleyball. And I wish I had the full list right in front of me, but I will just say Mater Dei is well known for having a good amount of players in women's volleyball committing to Division I schools. And I think it's pretty cool. But all in all, for that matchup, I was very surprised Mater Dei got swept, but it just goes to show that Mira Costa is pretty darn good, if you ask me. So, for Mater Dei, they have Samira Gordon going to Michigan, and then they also have Isabel Clark going to San Diego, Melissa Kawa going to Stanford, Julia Kakis going to Brown, and then they had one other girl committing this past week as well before the match happened. I don't remember. I want to say it was like an Ivy League school. Yes, it was Sydney Rasuski, as she committed to Colgate. So nice little whatchamacallit. Nice little private, nice little like East Coast school right there. So yeah, Mater Dei's got quite a number. Mater Dei has quite a number of great commits on their team. And Adam says, is Mater Dei just great at all sports? For the most part, yes. I don't really know the last sport that they're not really good at, but I digress. Maybe flag football, but that's a new sport that's happening all over California. So that is basically that for Mater Dei and Mira Costa. There was also another matchup that happened that same day Mater Dei and Mira Costa played. It was Redondo Union playing Marymount, and honestly, that was what I was hoping Mater Dei Mira Costa was going to be. As Redondo Union actually wound up reverse sweeping Marymount. Marymount actually took the first two sets, but they wound up. But credit to the Seahawks, they took the next three sets, and I was very impressed that the Seahawks really reverse swept them. So when I saw that Redondo Union forced that fifth set, I knew that they were basically the match was in their hands, because when they're down 0-2 and they managed to tie it up 2-2 on their home floor, you're basically in trouble, because Redondo Union has all the momentum, and then they have everything going at it in terms of their home crowd and their energy. So I will just say for Redondo Union and Coach Tommy Chaffins, it was a very impressive win, as Abby Zimmerman, who is actually the younger sister of, I forget her name, but it's not, Kira Zimmerman is the oldest one. Abby Zimmerman is the youngest one of the Zimmerman clan. I'm blanking on the middle child, who is actually going to be playing basketball, which I did not know this. So all in all, for Redondo Union, it was just a phenomenal win for the Seahawks, and I really want to see them actually. Ella Zimmerman, that's her name. Ella Zimmerman is the middle one, and she's going to be playing basketball. I want to say for like Portland State. I'm not entirely sure, but she is committing to play basketball at a Division I school, not volleyball. But Abby Zimmerman is basically carrying the torch, and the Zimmerman family is just amazing. For Marymount, they're kind of a little on the semi-rebuilding side. They're not bad by any means. I think they have a few players that are sitting out due to the transfer rule, because I don't want to get too much into this, but Marymount's a private school, and they're allowed to recruit other players to come to their school and whatnot. And when you're a private school, that's kind of a huge advantage right there. So for Marymount, this was a tough loss for them, but they are not anywhere near bad. I think for Marymount, they're going to learn from this loss. Kerry Klein is a great coach, and the Sailors of Los Angeles are going to be doing great things. I might be seeing some high school volleyball over the weekend. There is the Dave Mose tournament happening in Orange County but I work 10 to 2 on Saturday, so I can't guarantee myself going to that. Unless the final's at like 3 o'clock, but I think they slate the final to be at like 2 or something, but we'll see. All right, that's enough for high school girls volleyball. Let's go over the top matchups to watch for in Week 3 on the NCAA women's volleyball side of things, and then I'll let you all go. So, starting on Tuesday, we have number 5 Stanford at Rice. This is a sneaky good matchup. Remember how Rice lost to Louisiana last week? Well, if Rice plays like they did against Louisiana, Stanford's going to destroy them. And this is going to be played in Houston. This is going to be played at Rice. So Rice does have the advantage, and Stanford is not going to have to complain about low attendance. But for Rice, they got to bring a big-time crowd to basically cheer on the Owls. But for Stanford, I wouldn't say that Rice is going to get demolished, but like I said, if they play like they did against Louisiana, Stanford's going to make this a walk in the park. Because with Kendall Kipp, Aaliyah Rubin, Cammie Minor just setting the offense really well, I just really think that Stanford is just going to be too good and too hot for Rice to handle. Then we've got Wednesday. We have number 16 Creighton at number 4 Nebraska. This is kind of the whole volleyball day aftermath, just because Creighton is located in the Nebraska-Omaha area, and then Nebraska is hosting Creighton. This is going to be a sneaky good matchup right here. It's number 16 Creighton at number 4 Nebraska. I think this is going to be a good matchup. For Creighton, they kind of rebounded nicely after losing to Duke in the first week. I will say this for Creighton, this is their chance to prove themselves. And for Nebraska, they have just been mowing down opponents, but this is kind of their first true opponent that they're going to be truly playing. So I hope for Nebraska they aren't getting too complacent with sweeping too many of the unranked opponents, because now they get a big-time opponent in Creighton, and they also get another big-time opponent later on in the week. Well, not big-time opponent, but they get a sneaky good challenge later on in the week. Then on Friday, we have the Big Ten Pac-12 Challenge. We have number 15 Ohio State at number 5 Stanford. Then we have number 10 Minnesota versus number 6 Oregon. For Stanford's sake, I hope there is at least some sort of big crowd. The risk of playing these matches at Stanford is that there's no big crowd. You saw this against Florida when there was only like 1,800 fans in attendance. So for Stanford, you better draw a big crowd when you play the Ohio State and Minnesota, because this is actually the last year that the Big Ten Pac-12 Challenge is going to be a thing, because Oregon's moving to the Big Ten, and Stanford, if you all have been living under a rock, you kind of missed this news, but Stanford is actually moving to the ACC with the likes of Cal and SMU from the AAC. So I'll discuss that news a little bit later, but this is the last time we're going to have Big Ten Pac-12 Challenge, and then after that it is bye-bye. Unless they want to have Washington State and Oregon State playing the likes of, I don't know, Ohio State and Minnesota. I mean, maybe Washington State would be a good matchup, but I don't know about Oregon State. No offense to Oregon State fans, of course. And then, also on Friday, we have my match of the week, in my opinion. Number 8, BYU at number 13, Washington State. Now, you're probably wondering, well, why is that your match of the week and not like Stanford, Minnesota, which is on Saturday? Well, anyone could pick the Big Ten Pac-12 Challenge as match of the week, but I want to think outside the box. I want to give BYU Washington State the spotlight just because it's the battle of two Power 5 conference teams, and also it's the clash of the Cougars. Washington State Cougars taking on the BYU Cougars at Washington State. It's the final day of the Washington State tournament, and I think it's going to be a very exciting matchup, and I really want to see a barn burner between BYU and Washington State. And I'm going to feel so bad for the PA announcer and for like the sports writers that have to basically work around saying Cougars. Oh, and I also have to feel bad for the radio broadcasters as well. So that's my match of the week right there, and that's BYU, Washington State. Then we also have number 9 Pitt at number 24 Marquette on Friday. Now, like I said, Marquette has a lot to prove because they went 0-2 last week, losing to the likes of Purdue and Kansas. You're hosting Pitt, Tennessee and Loyola of Chicago. I would like to see you all put on your big girl shorts and actually prove that you deserve to be in the top 25. Because if you somehow lose to... If you somehow go 0-3, you're out of the top 25. I can guarantee you that much. But for Pitt, they had themselves a great week last week as they managed to beat Kentucky twice. Once at Kentucky, the other time at Fitzgerald Fieldhouse or Pitt, wherever they play the second game. Regardless, they play Marquette, which I feel Pitt can definitely win that one. They know Aubrey Hamilton of Marquette, as she did play for Notre Dame, and for Pitt, they do have familiarity with her. And for Pitt, they just have to play their game, and they just have to not make silly mistakes. May not sound as easy as it is, but I think for Pitt, they should be able to win this one. But don't count out those Golden Eagles just yet. Also on Friday, we have number 21 Houston at number 21 Houston versus number 19 Kentucky at Purdue. So Kentucky could also be playing SMU or Purdue, depending on what happens with, I guess, SMU and Purdue. I guess it's kind of like a round-robin tournament, but they had like 5 teams participating. So, Purdue, what are you doing when it comes to this tournament? Figure it out. Anyway, so Houston, Kentucky is 1-3, which, I mean, obviously that 1-3 is actually courtesy of 2 Pitt losses. But the other loss came from Colorado State. And then for Houston, obviously that loss to Texas State dropped them from 13 all the way down to 21. So now they got to work their way up again. It feels so weird seeing Kentucky behind the likes of Arkansas and Tennessee. So for Kentucky, they really got to work their way back up to the top because they have high expectations. They were chosen to finish first in the SEC. I know SEC play hasn't started yet, but if they're not ready for SEC play by the time they conclude a non-conference play, I really think Florida could actually win the SEC. And that says a lot because I was so high on Kentucky this year. But for Kentucky, I think they've kind of still have to find their identity, and they have to find their identity in terms of their high expectations this year and for some of their new transfers that have come in. Also getting refamiliarized with the new players. So that is that for all of Friday's matchups. Jumping over to Saturday. Now, I'm going to sound biased for making this a matchup to watch for, but this is kind of a sneaky good matchup. Long Beach State at number 4 Nebraska. You all are probably screaming at your phone and you're probably screaming at your earbuds saying, oh my god, why did Teran make this a matchup to watch for? No, I am not biased when I say this. I think this is going to be a sneaky good match just because Long Beach State has been so battle-tested. They also play Omaha 2 days before they play Nebraska. I'll say this about Long Beach State. They've played some darn good opponents. They played Texas, LMU, Indiana, which they won in 4 on Thursday. Washington, which they battled to, almost forced a 5th set, but lost 2 in 4. And then they pushed UCLA to 4. Maybe could have pushed that 1 to 5 had they not gotten off to a slow start in set 1. But for Long Beach State, I could maybe see Long Beach State taking a set off of Nebraska. You got to remember that Nebraska will also be playing Creighton, and I want to say Nebraska is playing some other opponent prior to this. But I will just say, I don't be surprised if Nebraska wins. I'm not trying to be faithless to Long Beach State, but I just think that this is kind of a matchup that Nebraska is destined to win. And the reason why I think that Long Beach, this is a sneaky good matchup, another reason why this is a sneaky good matchup is because Tyler Hildebrand, who was on the Nebraska coaching staff back when Nebraska won the NCAA championship back in 2016, is making his return to Lincoln yet again. So, looking at who Nebraska has beaten, they've beaten the likes of Utah State, Lipscomb, SMU, Omaha, and Kansas State, none of which are ranked. They now play Creighton on Wednesday, and then they have 2 days off after that, and then they play Long Beach State. So now the schedule starts to pick up for Nebraska, and contrary to popular belief, I think that Long Beach State matchup is going to be a huge trap game for Nebraska because after they play Long Beach State, Nebraska has Stanford, which it's so easy to look so far ahead to that big-time matchup against the Cardinal, especially when that is a top 10 matchup. Heck, it could be even a top 5 matchup by the time the next coaches poll rolls around. But for Nebraska, they just got to stay focused, and I can already see the Devaney Center being packed. Hannah Lesiak of Long Beach State knows what it's like playing in the Devaney Center, and obviously Tyler Hildebrand knows what it's like playing, or not playing, being in the Devaney Center. So, in all honesty, I really think this is going to be a sneaky good matchup, and I think it's going to be a matchup to watch for. And I will just say this right now, don't be surprised if Long Beach State takes the set off Nebraska. Tyler Hildebrand said it in his post-game press conferences, or any of his post-game press conferences. They're right there with some of these big-time opponents. The only true bad loss that they have at this moment is kind of the LMU loss. But even LMU, if they don't lose that first set, it's kind of a whole different outlook for Long Beach State. And they had to dig their way out of a 24-21 deficit. So I really think Long Beach State can give Nebraska a run for their money. And it's also going to help that Long Beach State is going to be facing Omaha, and they're going to be familiarized with the state of Nebraska, considering not all their players are familiarized with the state of Nebraska and whatnot. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Long Beach State can do. Obviously, I think Nebraska is going to win, but don't be surprised if Long Beach State makes those Huskers sweat. Also on Saturday, we have Day 2 of the Big Ten Pac-12 Challenge. You've got number 10, Minnesota, at number 5, Stanford, and then you've got number 15, Ohio State, versus number 6, Oregon. So, for Ohio State, they lost twice last week to Georgia Tech, but Georgia Tech is really proving themselves as a really good team. Okay, maybe not really good, but they're proving themselves as a top 10 team. I think Georgia Tech, everyone was so hyped, was so bent around Julia Bergman graduating and then having this whole narrative of what is Georgia Tech going to do without Julia Bergman. And Georgia Tech has really answered the call. They answered the call against Penn State, and they answered the call last week against the Ohio State. On the road, mind you. So those are 2 big wins right there against Ohio State. They beat them twice in the span of 2 days. Ohio State, they've got 2 big matchups right there. And again, they're not the Ohio State from the past few seasons, back when they made the Elite Eight and whatnot. I think for Ohio State, they're going to have their work cut out for them playing the likes of Oregon and Stanford. Oregon, I think, is really flying under the radar as, okay, maybe not under the radar, but I think Oregon could be a top 5 team if they play their cards right. And I'm not making that a pun because Stanford and whatnot. I think Oregon could be a top 5 team if they manage to basically take care of business this weekend. And if Stanford somehow slips up, then Oregon could be creeping their way into the top 5, and Stanford could be creeping their way out of the top 5. So we'll see what happens. And then Stanford just can't afford to look ahead to Nebraska, just because, well, for starters, it's so easy to look ahead to that matchup, but you have Minnesota and Ohio State on your dish. So Stanford's got 3 straight Big Ten opponents. Go figure. I guess it's good that Stanford's not playing in the Big Ten and they're playing in the ACC. And then on Sunday, we have number 12 Penn State at number 2 Louisville. I almost forgot this was kind of a matchup to watch for, but this is going to be a nice little matchup right here. Can we really see Penn State showing their true potential? And will we also see Louisville pulling out a big time win? Yes, they beat Washington State, but that was back when Washington State was in the high 20s. Now they get to face a true quality opponent in Penn State. Not that I don't think Washington State is a true quality opponent. I think that Penn State is probably more stacked across the board. I mean, yes, you've got Washington State returning a majority of their starters or majority of their players from last year, but I will say that Penn State really gotten better in terms of the transfer portal and in terms of the offseason. And then for Louisville, this is their chance to really prove themselves. They've only beaten one quality opponent. Now they can beat another quality opponent if they play their cards right. And that's no pun intended, just because they're the Cardinals. Also on Sunday, we have number 18 Tennessee taking on number 24 Marquette. I thought Tennessee doesn't play Pitt, which maybe I might have missed that one, but Tennessee Marquette's going to be a nice little matchup right there, just because Marquette kind of has that last gasp to probably stay in the top 25, and then Tennessee is going to still do what it can to try to climb up the top 25. And in all honesty, for Pitt, Pitt doesn't play Tennessee. This is so freaky, dude. Okay, that's weird. They played him last year and the year before. Anyway, Tennessee Marquette, if Tennessee continues to play their cards right, they could be a threat in the SEC. They do have Morgan Fingal and something more. It's just something more. Janasia Moore and Erica Lovett. I forgot Erica Lovett transferred to Tennessee from Long Beach State. That is someone that Long Beach State could really use right about now. But for Tennessee, the fact that they almost beat Wisconsin after they were down 0-2 speaks to high volumes of how the Lady Vols are really good. And for the Lady Vols, this is kind of a good little test right here. And it's kind of good that they're not playing Pitt, because maybe they'll see Pitt in the NCAA tournament. Who knows? And they'll see other teams like Pitt in the SEC, like Arkansas, Kentucky, Florida, Auburn, LSU. LSU is kind of a little underrated. I don't think LSU has found their bearings just because they've faced so many good opponents. So for Tennessee, this is good that they're facing some quality opponents early on, especially when they played Wisconsin. That was pretty darn good as well. And then closing out the matches to watch for is unranked UCLA taking on number 23 unranked UCLA taking on number 23 Hawaii. So here's my thing for UCLA. If you want to get ranked in the top 25, you might want to beat Hawaii. For Hawaii, they made their debut in the top 25 this season, and they have totally earned it. Now it's all about defending their title of being in the top 25. And they also have Liberty and Pepperdine. I don't know much about Liberty, but Pepperdine, I really want to say Pepperdine could be a sneaky good opponent for Hawaii, but they have kind of underachieved. It's kind of going to be a homecoming for Scott Wong, who was kind of I think he was on the coaching staff for Hawaii as well. I don't know if he was the head coach, but he was kind of on the coaching staff for Hawaii. Regardless, Hawaii, if they're thinking that this is going to be a walk in the park this week, they have another thing coming. UCLA is straight up phenomenal. If you remember last year's matchup between the Bows and the Bruins managed to pull off an amazing come-from-behind victory. They were down 2-1. It looked like the fourth set was going to go to Hawaii, and they were going to win their whole outrigger tournament. But UCLA managed to turn the tide, force the fifth set. The UCLA, if I recall, won the fourth set 25-23, and they wound up just steamrolling their way through that fifth set. So for UCLA, I could honestly see a barn burner between them and the Bows. You've got Anna Dodson, who is just straight up phenomenal. Like I said, Desiree Becker, Carly Hendrickson. The list goes on and on of players who are really going to become X factors for the Bruins. And like I said, Peyton Dueck, who's done really well at the libero position. And then you also have Ashley Mullen, who has taken the setter position from UCLA and ran with it, is just great as well. So, and you also can't count out Iman Njai and Sheridan Leverett. So I think UCLA is basically stacked across the board. So we'll see what happens between the Bows and the Bruins. I think that's going to be the cherry on top of all of Week 3's matchups to watch for. So that's that for all of NCAA women's volleyball preview of week number 3. So before we end things off, I got to give my thoughts on the ACC adopting Stanford, Cal, and SMU. So, I also got to give one more thing. So Florida State, their head coach Chris Poole, as of this recording, Florida State defeated Samson today in straight sets. So their head coach, Chris Poole, is actually one win away from achieving 900 career coaching victories. So for Florida State, they could have achieved that this past weekend had they not lost to the likes of SMU on Friday and Auburn on Sunday. Which I get Auburn's a good opponent, but I did not expect the SMU loss. But for Florida State, they might want to get used to that. I may not be too high on Florida State, but I will just say this. I hope that coach does get that 900th victory. He'll get it eventually. If it's not going to be this weekend, it's going to be the following weekend, and so on and so forth. So we'll see what happens. But back to the ACC adopting or getting Stanford, Cal, and SMU. Well, Pitt and Stanford is going to be a barn burner, as well as Louisville and Stanford, in terms of women's volleyball. And then you've got Cal, and then Cal is going to be so interesting. That's going to be so brutal for Cal in terms of the ACC. Not just in women's volleyball, but for all the other sports. But who knows? Maybe Cal could surprise. And I don't know much about SMU. SMU's got some good players in terms of this year. I don't know what their future looks like next year, but man, it's going to be interesting to see SMU in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Keep in mind, Cal and Stanford are both from California, and now they got to go down to the Atlantic Coast. They got to go down to the East Coast to play the likes of Pitt, Louisville, Florida State, Miami, Georgia Tech, the Carolinas, in NC State and North Carolina, Duke, Virginia Tech, Clemson, Boston College. That's going to be a lot of frequent flyer miles for the Cardinal as well as Cal. At least for SMU, they're kind of halfway there. But, man, it's going to be a lot of flying. So, if you're all keeping track, that's only going to leave Oregon State and Washington State in the Pac-12 next season. Unless Stanford and Cal aren't going to be in the ACC next year. And it's going to be in the following year. But I think that's going to be the case. I think Stanford, Cal, and SMU are going to be in the ACC next year. So what's going to happen with Oregon State and Washington State? So I don't know what to really say except maybe those two to the Big West Conference or the Mountain West Conference or the WAC. What's going to happen to their football teams? That's what I want to know. So we'll see what happens with those two teams going forward. But all in all, yeah, I'm just rather perplexed by this. I also should get this NBA news out of the way. I want to give a huge and belated congratulations to Ryan Mather for being officially named to the Rutgers assistant coaching staff. That's, for those that don't know who Ryan Mather is, and I don't know if I discussed this news, but Ryan Mather is a member of the Texas Tyrants, formerly of the Las Vegas Ramblers, but he is now an assistant coach for Rutgers, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, and that's really phenomenal, and their women's volleyball team. So I'm hoping that Ryan Mather can continue to do great things, not only for the NBA, but for Rutgers. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Set Point. I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you listen at any time, any place, anywhere, I appreciate you. Shout out to the chat room on Spreaker, Adam Karnick, Mikey Two Guns, Mike Pat, Davidson Crooks, Larry B, and last but not least, John B. I really appreciated that comment from John B, telling me that he saw me at one of the matches. Hats off to you right there. I will not be at any volleyball matches this weekend, which is a bummer, but hey, what can you do? I'll most likely be back at Long Beach State or UC Irvine once they kick off conference play. Irvine and Long Beach State are probably in the meat and potatoes of their non-conference schedule, so I won't be seeing them until Big West Conference play. But I will be back on Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, most likely, unless said otherwise. Until then, have yourself a great rest of the week. Enjoy the volleyball action. I will see you on Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Have a great weekend, everybody, and a great week, everybody. Happy Labor Day as well. Peace!